Hello, and welcome to Dishelved with Adam White. I know it's probably been a while since I saw you last. I've been reading various things, and I do want to say first that I read Rocannon's World for the Ursula K. Le Guin read along for the Hainish novels. I did read that. I'm not going to talk about it today, but I'm hoping to be involved in whatever comes up with that. Uh, I, I I'll just say that I thought it was a really good book. It wasn't a great book, but I thought it was really good, especially if it was her first novel. It was really well written, and I really enjoyed the end. But that's all I'll say about that now. Today, mainly, I'm talking about Warren magazines, and which were Creepy, this one, Eerie, and Vampirella. Now, I read the first volume of the archives. Creepy collects issues 1 through 5. Eerie collects issues 1 through 5. And Vampirella collects actually the first 7 issues of Vampirella. Now, I've got Creepy here to show you. Uh, Lots of good stuff. Um, the also is Eerie, the first one. The artists they had in this were Frank Frazetta, Al Williamson, Gray Morrow, Alex Toth, Steve Ditko. Um, Most of the stories were written by Archie Goodwin. Just excellent, excellent horror comics. And they did it in the magazine format to get around the comics code. Now, they weren't uh, gory or salacious or anything. They were just really well told stories that were drawn by some of the best artists in the business. Later on, you had people like Richard Corbin and uh, just an endless supply of really top artists. Um, Now, I don't have Vampirella to show you. My options to get that were to pay about $40 for a secondhand copy, or I could read it for free on Kindle Unlimited. So I chose reading it for free on Kindle Unlimited. And I'm glad I did because it was my least favorite of the three. But anyway, Creepy was excellent. It contained in I think the first issue, the last sequential story that Frank Frazetta ever did. And see if I can find that. But it uh, collected the last time he drew, and doesn't say. Oh, page 30. Yeah, right here. It was the last sequential art that he did before he started just doing covers. And he did the covers for Creepy and Eerie and Vampirella for a while, but he was making about $250 on those, and his paperback covers were garnering him anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000. So you can see why he stopped doing the Warren covers after a while, because he wasn't getting exactly the same pay scale as he was on the paperback books, such as Conan and the other ones that he did. But Creepy was really good. I really enjoyed it. The covers were fantastic by uh, Frank Frazetta. I thought this was probably my favorite one. I would have chosen that one to go on the cover. Great werewolf cover. But just the art in it is just thoroughly fantastic throughout the whole thing. And it's all in black and white, which really works well for it. I really enjoy black and white comics. It's a shame there's not really any around anymore. Usagi Yojimbo was the last one really to hold out on that, and Stan Sakai finally said that just with the reader demographics what they were, they just had to go to color. So, but back in the 60s and 70s, you could get away with a black and white magazine format comic because there was a real interest in it. And with good reason, because these were really good. They're kind of like almost like mini Twilight Zone stories. And I mean that in the best possible way because I love the Twilight Zone. But you'd always have these little horror stories that were like usually 6 to 8 pages. And you'd have, 5 or 6 in an issue, and then you get in the archives you get 5 issues of each in Creepy and Eerie and 7 issues in Vampirella. And they just would have like a little twist ending or something that you didn't see coming, and I really enjoyed that format for these. uh, Creepy was excellent. I thought the story selection was excellent. They had some various authors, but Archie Goodwin, who was the editor on it, was also the author for most of the stories. And Archie Goodwin's stories were fantastic. I mean, I don't know how he came up with all this stuff. He was just a fantastic writer, and he was an artist too. But he focused on the writing. Now, I'll say that I liked Eerie even better. It was the secondary magazine to Creepy, but I actually liked it better. Um, I mean, it wasn't that it was anything, you know, substantially better than Creepy. It was just pretty much another version of Creepy, but it just had. I really enjoyed the stories in it, and Archie Goodwin did, like I said, most of the writing in it, and it was just absolutely fantastic. See if I can find some of the covers in here. But yeah, I mean, just, oh yeah, here we go. Can't have one without a dinosaur. But the art was fantastic. I can't believe the number of artists they had in here that were great. It's the same ones like they had with Creepy, and they were just utterly fantastic. And I really enjoyed them. Uh, just horror magazines. There was a real market for it in the 60s and 70s, and it was more in style of the horror of the old 40s Universal horror movies, not the new modern day gory stuff that just isn't any count. Um, Torture porn and all that stuff that comes out now. These were the real classic horror. And you'd have your werewolves and your vampires and cults and just all sorts of stuff. Now they had sort of like hosts, like the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt, and they had Uncle Creepy for Creepy, and they had Cousin Eerie for Eerie, and then they had Vampirella, which I don't have to show you because I read it on Kindle. And Vampirella had a story in the first issue, a couple of stories in the first 7 issues of the magazine, and they were okay. Forrest J. Ackerman wrote the first story uh, in the first issue of Vampirella, and I thought that the Vampirella stories were more. They kind of felt like the slush pile from Creepy and Eerie, the stuff that they didn't want to use that wasn't first rate, and they kind of wanted to use the secondary stuff in another magazine, so they came up with Vampirella and had her be the host of the comic. Now it was kind of TNA kind of stuff. I mean, nothing uh, more than just suggestive stuff. There wasn't any nudity or anything in it, but just lots of scantily clad women, especially Vampirella. And apparently that was enough to keep it going in the beginning, but apparently later on they had much better stories in it. Like I said, I'm only talking about these first archive collections of each. I'm just going straight simply on those. And Vampirella was my third favorite of the three. And it just didn't have the atmosphere that Creepy and Eerie had. And but I started reading some of the later stuff of Vampirella in a collection of just Vampirella stories from her magazine. And once they got Archie Goodwin writing them, then you had something going. And I can see why it would have got better with time, because Archie Goodwin just could write the heck out of a story. And he wrote some really interesting Vampirella stuff that came later in the magazine than what the first archive collection covers. But read all those and enjoyed them. Then I read this James Warren Empire of Monsters, pretty thick book by Bill Shelley. Uh, he also wrote quite a few books on comics history and certain individuals. Like he did one on Otto Bender that I loved. Uh, that was just fantastic, and is actually the reason my dog is named Otto is after Otto Bender, who was a great writer of Silver Age Superman and the original Captain Marvel, and he wrote a great. Bill Shelley wrote a great book on that, so I figured this would be good. I just had never picked it up and read it, but I thought, well, since I'm reading the Creepy and Eerie and Vampirella magazines, I might as well read the biography too. And it was excellent, just like I figured it'd be. And James Warren led a real interesting life. Some people really liked him, some people really hated him. He just kind of was a person that could be whatever the situation called for. He was a lot smarter, I think, than people gave him credit for. And you got a lot of the behind the scenes stories of how he got certain artists and he and writers and stuff, and then he'd have, of course, turnover in editorial. He had several editors. Archie Goodwin started, but then didn't stay for more than 2 years. And he had, I can't remember what the guy's name was. I'd never heard of him before, but another guy that ran editorial for a while, and he had Louise Jones, later Louise Simonson, worked and had. When she was doing it, it was some of the most prosperous times they had with the magazines. And they just were like, oh, we don't know if a woman can be editor and all this. And then of course she just blows all the others out of the water by picking fantastic stories and letting the artists and writers work and putting in there what they did, because they were fantastic, just fantastic stuff. And that was in some of the later ones. So I'm looking forward to getting more of the archive editions and reading more of these magazines. But the biography by Bill Shelley is fantastic. Everything you wanted to know about James Warren. Then no, I thought I had something. There's a few pictures in here, but most are in black and white. Um, but it was a really fascinating biography about a really interesting person, and I highly recommend it. I think it is available in paperback. The hardcover's not available anymore, and for a while it was out of print, but I looked on Amazon and it looks like you can get it in paperback now. I'm not sure about Kindle. I also recommend the Otto Bender uh, biography that was written by Bill Shelley. Uh, it's available on Kindle, but I think it's out of print uh, in the paperback. But it's really worth your time reading. Both of these are. Anyway, really fascinating stuff. Really fun. Just horror in the way that it should be. That gives you a little scare, a little frightening moment, some moments, and without hitting you over the head with gore and stuff like that. I just really don't care for that at all. And these stories didn't have that. They were really tastefully done horror stories with just some of the best artists that you could ask for. Russ Heath did some later that were some of the most memorable of all. Neil Adams, he did some of his earliest work on these magazines, Creepy and Eerie. Uh, just absolutely fantastic, stable artists. I can't recommend these enough. Creepy and Eerie. And like I said, the Vampirella was not as good, but from what I read in the biography, it got better later, and had better quality of stories like the other two did. Uh, anyway, that's all I'll say about that. Uh, hope you guys are doing well out there in this new year, and check these out: Creepy, Eerie, Vampirella, and the biography James Warren Empire of Monsters by Bill Shelley. Uh, check all that out. It's well worth your time. If you're a horror fan, you'll love this. It talks about also his famous Monsters of Filmland magazine that he did. It just, and the people he worked with were some of the best people in the business, period. And he really gave artists a showcase when they needed it, and that ended up getting them a lot of work in the future at some of the bigger named companies like Marvel and DC and stuff. But a lot of them got their start in Creepy and Eerie magazine. So check these books out. I highly recommend them. And I will see you when I see you.